All right, so attendance quiz. I guess I'm running the recording, that's all right. I think I asked the question based on one of the ClubDB lectures that I had posted, recorded lectures from a prior semester. And it's a something is often used in web-deployed applications that are accessing a back-end database due to the expense in application time and memory resources needed to make the JDBC connections to the database. So this was the last part of the ClubDB, which was the connection pool. So a connection pool is a resource saver and makes the application more efficient. The pool is built on startup, and it doesn't have to keep trying to create a database link every time a user accesses the application. So connection pool should be our answer here. And indeed, all right. The other thing I was doing off the recording, but we just want to point out that we did set a due date of next week for ClubDB. All of the needed lectures are there, even though we didn't do them all in class this semester. They're out there. And I also did post the a lecture that I usually give for the final project about building that drop-down on the Henry books. And so what we're really going to do today is start the JPA persistence, the Java persistence example, which still uses ClubDB. So we're just going to make a new project, and then as we need resources from ClubDB, we'll copy them in. But we'll go ahead and I'll download the link here, or the oh, I already did it. The spec, what am I trying to say? The program spec. And I don't even know that it's that useful. We'll see what it has to say. It's pretty basic, I think. Yeah. So the persistence API is talked about in chapter 13 of our Murrock text, and he does a pretty decent job. He uses Eclipse Link, which there are some different varieties of persistence tools. Hibernate is the one that you hear a lot about, but actually Eclipse Link is kind of catching up from what I hear. But the basic idea of persistence is, and I don't know where they got that term, it doesn't really seem to make any sense to me, but that's what it's called. The basic idea is, how do we get a database and records and tables from a database to link to our application, which is all about Java objects, typically plain old Java objects, POJOs, but anyway, that's the idea. And so the key to persistence tools is this object relational mapping. And you try to map database components, tables and records and so forth, to Java objects. And if you can do that successfully, you can actually greatly simplify your code, the code that manages reading the database elements and even updating the database for changes. And it does really simplify the code, and it manages connection pools within most of the persistence tools do that, so you don't have to worry about that yourself. And you've got a data source, so you don't have to keep worrying about the JDBC connection strings and things like that. You have them in one place. So we're going to start off, and what did I ask for the? So in part A, we're going to build our member. We're going to be able to retrieve a member using persistence, and then in part B, which will be for the future, we're going to, what are we going to do? We're going to extend that to the purchases screen, and then I think I even put, did I have the extra credit out here? Oh, no, so I usually give extra credit to update the purchases table. Maybe I'll think we're missing a week in this semester, so maybe we'll just leave it at this. All right. So we're going to start off with a new project but it's going to look a lot like ClubDB when we're done. In fact, it's going to look exactly like ClubDB. I need to also make sure I've got here on my machine, have I got the necessary items? I do have, okay, I've got as far as a member update servlet on my ClubDB. So I'm not going to just copy that project. As I said, I want to we want to go through a few setup things. So let's do a new project. That's a Java web application. And I'm going to call it ClubDB JPA for Java persistence. All of these items are fine, the Java EE7, the Tomcat. Now, I'm going to go next to the frameworks page. We're not going to use the frameworks, but just know that the tool, such as Hibernate, is kind of already built in to NetBeans, so that's one of the persistence tools, Hibernate, and we'll work with that in IS-294 in the fall, if you all are going to stay with us for the next level of Java. And then Spring Web is a more complex framework that does include, can work with Hibernate or Eclipse Link or both. So that's the last class that you would take from me in Java if you stay through the whole thing. All right, so we're going to finish this. And I'm going to go ahead and rebuild my folders for business, package, and servlets. So a business package in my source packages, and then a servlet, a Java package first, so servlets. And then I'm going to go ahead and rebuild the first servlet. I'm going to, because it'll actually have a lot less code in it when we're done with it. So rather than trying to copy the club logon servlet, I am going to just redo it inside the servlets, and that'll also create my web XML file and goodies like that. So it's a new servlet. It's still going to be called the same thing, so club logon servlet. And I'm going to add the deployment information. So I've got my web XML file, and then we still want club logon as the URL pattern, so that's all the same. So you can finish that. And we just don't need to copy too much code here, because we're going to be doing it in a different way. Yeah, no problem. And then I'm deleting out the usual culprits, the stuff that we don't really want in our servlets anyway. So deleting out some comments and the direct writing of HTML. We can, though, copy now at this point some code from the earlier ClubDB version, because that login page is going to be the same. Do you need me to hold on here? Or? Okay. And we are going to need our member.java business object as well. So I think I'm going to want logon JSP which I'm just going to copy out of my old ClubDB into my web pages area of the new JPA. So logon JSP is there, and I'll wait a moment. You can also copy member.java out of business in the earlier version into the new version. Oops, what did I just do? I accidentally deleted. I accidentally copied my JSP into my business package. Don't want that. Okay. So yeah, so we're taking member.java, copying it from the business, the old project business, into the new. You can do a refactor copy or just a copy. It should be fine either way. Now, let's see if I think there might be some stuff in the web XML. It will try to rename things if it finds name issues that link different objects. It'll try and shore up the name. Now, if we look at the web XML of the old project, we should have the mapping fine in our new project, but what we don't have is the welcome file list. So I'm going to copy that, the XML code from web XML in the old project for welcome file list and welcome file. So I'm going to copy that into the web XML in our new project. And of course, the new project doesn't have the member update servlet yet. That'll come later. This web XML came when I created the club logon servlet or recreated it in this project. So I'm looking at my web XML. Do I need to go back over? Or? Okay, so if you don't have a web XML, then do you have a servlet? Okay, so you missed a checkbox in the servlet. So what I would do at this point is just delete your servlet, right-click and delete it, and re-enter it. But when you ask for a new servlet, and you get to the second page, there is a checkbox that says Add Information to Deployment Descriptor. You need to check that box so if you don't have a web XML file, it will create one for you. So that's the step that was missed. Now you could also copy the web XML file from the old project, but it's got more in it than we have at this point. Are you seeing the steps? Are others okay so far? All right. Well, if we make the project our main project, and we can delete the index.html as well now that we've added our welcome file list. So I'm going to delete index.html. All we've got right now is the ability to show the logon page and go to the logon servlet and nothing happens. But I just want to make sure that it's running, loading up. So if we go to log on, we're at the blank club logon servlet page, or the result. Are you okay? Or yep, okay. So adding JPA to the project involves some libraries, and then creating, at least for Eclipse Link, what's called a persistence unit. So let's add a couple of libraries here. The first one I'm going to add is actually the JDBC driver. We still need that. The persistence unit will use it. So let's right-click on libraries and add a library. And we will add the library that's already in the list for MySQL JDBC driver. Okay. So we've got the JDBC connector in as a part of the project now. I don't know why that monitor keeps coming up. But now here's the first step to really adding persistence. So you can think of the persistence tools as kind of an overlay or a wrapper that wraps around the project and intercepts commands in a sense, but it uses annotations. Oh, well, that you can do it in a couple of ways. You can do XML configuration, or you can use annotations, and annotations are the way that everybody does it these days. So let's add a new library. So again, a second add library call, but this time we're going to add Eclipse Link, and I'm just going to add the basic JPA 2.1 Eclipse Link. Glassfish is an enterprise web server, and we haven't really been using it, and we're not going to do the model generation. So you can get, as I said, you can get really deep into persistence tools, and some people don't like them as all that much because it takes you another layer away from the bottom of the app, or the nitty-gritty of what the app is doing, and sometimes it can be a little annoying or difficult to use through this layer, but I think in the end it certainly provides enough additional capability and usefulness that it's worthwhile. So you don't have to write all of your own JDBC type connections. So everybody found Eclipse Link JPA 2.1. We're going to add that as a library. Okay, so there are several components to that library. And that'll just make it possible when we ask for an item we try to use, and part of the persistence tools will be able to do an import, and it'll find what we're talking about. Okay, now the next step is to create this thing called a persistence unit, which is really, we can think of it as a data source, or really a kind of a JDBC connection idea. So I think I can do it in the source packages. It's going to end up in the configuration files location, but I don't think it matters where you ask for it. So I'm going to right-click and go to a new, but this time it's a new other. And in your list of other, there should be persistence as one of the categories. And from the persistence category, we want a persistence unit, which is really going to give us the access to the database. Now there's an assistant, a pop-up wizard, if you will, that should come along and help us do our configuration. Everybody with me on persistence unit? All right, so next, database connection. Now you'll notice that there are a couple of database connections, including I have a JDBC MySQL because I connected inside my NetBeans, but I want to do a new database connection. Even if I've got Club available, I'm going to go through the new process. Okay. And the database connection driver is the MySQL connector J driver. And the reason I have to go through the new is to get all of the little components of this persistence unit specified. So it's a MySQL J connector driver. You'll notice it's got the driver files. On your dropdown, in the locate driver, did you add the library? No, I haven't hit add yet. The only thing I did was do a dropdown. Okay. I think we can skip the add and go to next. Yeah. So here is our MySQL connection parameters. The database is club, and we're going to remember the password and its root. So we've only got a root user on if you're using our machines. So root is correct, and sesame, or in your case, whatever password you set for the MySQL command line window. So mine was sesame, and I'm going to remember that password. You'll notice that the driver is specified, looks correct down here, but we want to test the connection. And I got a connection succeeded on my test. So I think I'm good. We okay out there? Ms. Seals, you're shaking your head no? No successful test? Is it possible? You've got club as the database name? And so double check on your machine, open up your MySQL command line client, double check that Sesame is still working there or whatever you have, and that the command line client access is able to access the engine. If we show databases, I've got the club database showing. Can you still connect to it from the MySQL? Well, let me come take a look before we go any further. All right, so everybody seems to be in good shape now. We'll go next on this screen. This comes up, schema, no schema. I'm not quite sure why, but we can ignore it. So just click past it, next. Input connection name. Yeah, that should be fine. Unless, no, wait a minute. Do I want a different name for the connection? Hold on a second. Well, I outfoxed myself because I asked you all to create a new connection. Did any of you already have a JDBC MySQL for club that was showing in your list? No. Okay. If you had one that was showing in your original list, in other words, if you go back to the very beginning page, well, we can't go back that far, you're going to have a fail here, and you're going to end up having to select the one you already had. But if you didn't have one, this is okay. Go ahead and click Finish. Now, I'm getting unable to add connection. It already exists. But yours should come back with the correct database connection showing now in your provider database. Really? So so if you do a drop down, you've got a club, a JDBC club. Oh, so it should, if you say OK to the error, it should take you back to the first provider and database. Yeah, so you've already got club. Okay, so just select that one. You can, so the error, you got the error that came up? Oh, so yeah, so if you want to, you know you've got one already, you can click cancel. So we will use those of us who had already built one because we were playing around with the connection to the database inside NetBeans. You will use that one. This table generation strategy, leave on create. None is probably the better tool. I think he talks about it in the chapter. None is better for a final deployment situation. What this will do is that if your persistence unit tries to obtain a table record and the table doesn't exist, it's going to create it. It'll still fail, but it'll create the table for you. Okay, let's finish, and we've finally gotten to our source information, our club. Notice the name that it used, the persistence unit name, club DB JPA PU persistence unit, and so you can readjust some of these settings. You'll also notice that your configuration files should have now show a persistence XML, and if you go to the source, you'll see something that looks fairly familiar. We've got now a persistence unit setup named club DB JPA PU, but it also has all the properties. So the persistence JDBC URL, which is really the connection string, there it is. You can edit it directly if you need to. We've got the user as root, the driver as a JDBC driver. It took the com MySQL, which is okay. Password for the root user, Sesame, and then the persistence schema generation default is to create the table if you can't find it in the database. So that's essentially your data source details. All right. Now we are going to add to our Java objects some additional features to make use of the persistence tools. So the library's there. We have the persistence unit, so it knows what database it's going to connect to and how it's going to connect. We have to make it work. So inside the business package, we're going to create a very simple little utility program, and I'm just following our author's pattern, which is fairly standard. So right-click, New Java Class, and the Java class is going to be dbutil, dbutil, and we're now going to make our first connection to an actual persistence tool. So in this class, we are going to create a private static final entity manager factory. So the names for these things are just crazy, and you're going to get all mixed up. I still do. Entity manager factory EMF. And so, as I think our author goes into, Murak goes into, you need an entity manager factory in order to give you an entity manager which you actually use during the persistence operations. And one of them is thread-safe, the entity manager, and one of them is not. So you build a static entity manager factory, EMF, and it's going to be from the persistence package. So persistence dot create entity manager factory, and what you create is the name that is on the persistence unit. So club DB JPA PU. Whoops, that needs to be inside double quotes. So in other words, and you'll notice it did one of the imports for me. It imported Java persistence. So the persistence class package can create an entity manager factory. And we're saying, okay, give me a factory which connects to club DB JPA PU, which is the persistence unit. If we go back, it's up still up here. So persistence unit name is club DB JPA PU. And that is what we need for the factory to be created, and that's still another import. So add the Java Persistence Entity Manager Factory class. So that gives us a private constant for the entity manager, but we're going to call the DB util to give us the factory. So we need a public static entity manager factory. So it's going to return the factory, get, let's try that again. Sorry, we're going to call it get em factory. So that's the name of the method. So it's a static method, get entity manager factory, that returns an object of type entity manager factory. And I realize this doesn't make any sense yet, and in some ways it never makes any sense. But the job is to return EMF. So the DB util class has static constants. One of them will generate a factory based on the persistence unit that we've defined. And then the public method will return the private factory. So that's the first step. It's showing me an error. I don't think that's still there. Let me clean and build. Yeah, so the error is gone. Now, we are going to annotate, now that we have persistence in our package, we're going to annotate the member class so that it can map as a Java object, it can map to the actual database table. So if I go back into my database, I use club and I describe TVL members, I need this object or this record layout to match my Java object. So this is the object relational mapping that they talk about all the time in persistence. Okay, so we're going to go to member.java and we're going to use annotations. And the first annotation that we are going to use is entity. So at entity says, hey, this is an object which maps to a persistence component. And we will need to import Java persistence entity. And then we are going to tell the persistence unit, which is going to read the member class, we need to tell it that the table that this maps to in the database is named TBL members. And that's another persistence import. Okay, so we're declaring our entity member that's going to match TBL members. And now, unfortunately, well, there are two ways to do this. You can map the member object according to the get and set methods that are in it, in which case the persistence software will use the get and set methods, or you can map directly to your globals variables, which is the more traditional or typical way of doing it. It uses reflection, which we know a little bit about from Java 2, and I guess we did reflection here this semester. I'm already losing track. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and use the mapping the annotations directly on the globals, but that's going to mean that we're going to have to separate these out. So I'm going to take private strings for all my name pieces. And status as well. But one of the things we want to do with the dates, because the member date is an actual date in the table, we're going to have to do some modifications. So we're going to make this a private date, member date, and then, oops, I forgot my semicolon here in a couple of places. All right. Then we've got a couple of longs, private long for password and password attempt. Now, when you change the date, you need to be careful here. It's tempting to make this a SQL date, but it's not. We actually want to use the Java utility date. So you'll need an import for Java util date. And now we're ready to start mapping these fields to the table TBL members. And we need to tell it what field it maps to in the table, and also we have to identify the primary key. So in TBL members, we have member ID directly as the primary key. A lot of the time, it'll be an auto number type field, an identity field, but this one has member ID. So we're going to say that at ID, and we're going to identify the column as memID. So name equals memID. And the upper and lower case doesn't really matter on your column names, but I'm just going to be consistent. So these are all going to be imports for persistence objects. So the ID is a persistence.id import, and the column is a persistence column import. So we've just mapped our member.java object's member ID field to an actual member ID element in the table. And one of the reasons for persistence is it's going to do all of this automatic, reading and populating of the data into an object. We had to do that all on our own in the earlier project when we did we checked for the database, and if the user was there and we authenticated the user, then we had to go through the result set and copy the fields into a member object, which became a session object. Well, that's one of the things that persistence does for you. It's going to do this automatic translation or mapping of the values in the records you read into the Java object. So the rest should just be columns. I guess I'm going to give myself a little space. So column name on the second one is last name. Column name on first name is first name. And so the mappings you don't have to have, in other words, you don't have to have your Java class use the same names as the table. You can call them anything you want because you're doing a direct mapping with annotations. All right, so we've got name equal middle name. And status. Now on member date, you have to do a couple of things. First of all, we're going to map the column. So the name in the database table is mem date. But this is a data type which has to be, sort of specially identified. So we're going to tell it that the temporal is a date. So we say we have an @temporal annotation, and inside we have a constant, a persistence constant that says, all right, temporal type is date. Now I don't think it's happy because I don't have my import. So let's see if it gets happy. We're going to import persistence temporal. Then we're going to import persistence temporal type. Those are separate classes, and now it's happy that yes, it understands that this column mem date is a date. The temporal time aspect is that this is a date. All right. Now I went ahead and loaded in year-to-date total and year-to-date total date, which are fields we have not previously been using in the table, but I think it will be unhappy if we don't have places for those to go. So let's, well, we can do password first. So at column name equals password. And then I'm going to create two new private variables, private double for year-to-date total, and that's going to be the column named YTD underscore total in the database, and then a private date, again a util date, year-to-date total DT, and that will be a column name equals YTD underscore total underscore DT. But once again, this is a time component, so we have to do an @temporal annotation with temporal type as date. Yeah, I know there's a lot of typing we're getting through here. We're almost done with the mapping. Here's the last thing, and this is one that might throw you for a loop at the beginning. Password attempt. Well, password attempt has to be a part of member, at least the way we've designed it, so that we can have it tell us whether it authenticated, if the password matches the password attempt. But obviously, password attempt is not stored in the database table. It's not stored in the record that's coming from the database. Perfectly fine to have more fields in your object than you have in the table, but any fields which are globals like that have to be marked as transient. So @transient, if I can spell that right, transient, yes. So that is the annotation for a field which is not to be included or not to be expected from the database, and there's an import for that. So Java persistence transient should finish up our mapping. Isn't that exciting? We've mapped our object to our database. Any questions, concerns? Everybody caught up or typing or no? Okay. So a couple of things that we're going to need to fix in our actual member now that we've changed member date to be an actual date. First of all, the empty constructor can't set a date to an empty string, so we're just going to set it to null. And then, let's see, what did I do? Well, first of all, we've got public set and get methods, which I'm going to go ahead and modify. I don't know that we'll need them because the persistence is actually going to handle. Well, let's just go ahead and make sure we've got them available. So public get is now not a string, it's a get member date date, so we use the date, and public set doesn't receive a string, it receives a date. However, for simplicity's sake, and because our member update doesn't really take changes to the member date, I'm going to just have an alternate get. Let's see, what did I do here? Yeah, I've got member date, so public string get mem date s. So get member date as a string. And here's what we can do. Because of the persistence and the fact that automatic software is filling our object, our member object, and then taking any changes back to the database when we persist. So that's when you persist an item to the database, you're updating or you're adding, or you can also merge. Anyway, we'll get to that in due course. But so the member date s will be the get for what we want to see on the member screen. So we still want to see it as a string. And what we can do is use a simple date format object, SDF, as a new simple date format. And you tell it the format you want. We want MM in caps for some reason, DD -YYYY. Okay. So in other words, we want, with this formatter, we want to take an object of type date and return it as a string with that format. But we need imports. So we import the simple date format. Oh, what did it just do? Oh, it just created an object I didn't want it to create. Why didn't I see that? Okay, let's delete that. I can't believe I did that. Oh, it's only got create class. What the heck is going on? Why is it? I'm sorry? Well, I misspelled new. Maybe that's why it did that. Yeah. Okay. Well, I put a capital N on new and it didn't have any idea what I was talking about. Okay. So don't keep your Java class in your business folder if you accidentally created one like I did. Now we can get the simple date format tool from the text package, and all we should have to do is return the SDF format. So we're going to return SDF.format of this member date. And I'm not even going to worry about the year-to-date total and year-to-date total date. At least I'm not going to worry about them yet. They are null. We might have to fix that in the database. The persistence software might hiccup at nulls, but we'll see. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So it's in your business package. Yeah. Let's see if we can clean and build and get rid of my red again. Okay. So there we go. Now, we have a member object that is annotated for persistence. We have the persistence unit, and we have the DB util. What we now need is the software to actually call on the persistence package to access the database. So, and we're going to do it for different, so purchases will have their own code and members will have their own code. So in the business package, I'm going to right-click and create a new Java class. And so this is the class which will do the member retrieving and updating. So Java class is, and I'm following our author's example again, member DB. So this is the database process class for member DB. All right, now what's going to go in this? Well, we need to be able to find a member in the database based on a member ID, because that's what we're going to receive. We're going to receive a login that's got a member ID. So we are going to create a public static method that returns the whole member object. Remember, persistence is allowing us to map database records to POJOs. So if we can do that mapping, we should be able to have it return a fully populated member object. The member, we'll call it, I'm going to call this get member by ID, and it just needs to it needs to receive a string member ID. But how is it really going to do its job? First of all, you have to create an entity manager, so that's the thread safe object that comes from the factory. We have to go to direct to the factory. So entity manager EM will be retrieved from the DB util class get EM factory, but that's the factory, so we're then going to use that global or that static factory to create an entity manager. So that's a method of the factory. So DB util can give us the factory. We're going to use that factory to create an entity manager, and we're going to keep that entity manager in an object called EM. And we do need to do an import here for the persistence entity manager. Okay. Now inside a try-catch, and you could do the whole thing in a try-catch, but we're assuming that the entity manager factory is working. Yeah, it's okay. If it's not working, it'll crash. So in a try-catch, we're simply going to say, all right, member M, you should be filled by the entity manager doing a find. So you'll notice that there are a number of overloaded finds. The main one is what class are you trying to find and what is the key that you're trying to use to find that object. So we're going to do a find, and the class is member.class, and the key is memID, which is the string that came into this method. So think about it from the servlet's perspective. It's going to read a member ID from the login page, and it needs to know, does this member exist? So it's going to use MemberDB's static method getMemberById, send it that member ID, and let the factory see if it can find a member class based on the persistence unit, which it has already instantiated. All right, we're going to return M if we find it. If we catch, oh no, sorry, we don't even need to, well, it'll return null if it doesn't find it, so we can investigate whether we're successful or not by whether M is null when it comes back. So actually our author points out that, and we haven't been doing this, I haven't been doing this very much, we do need a finally. You should close the entity manager finally. So in other words, as you exit, please close the EM entity manager. And if this works like it's supposed to, that's all you have to do. Poof, you've got a member object populated from the database. Let's see if we can get enough code in our servlet to test that proposition. Is everybody okay so far? Okay, on your MemberDB, look for semicolons or mismatched braces and things like that. So back to the servlet. I'll get us set up with the some of the things that we know we'll need. We're going to have a string, message, empty, and user ID, empty, and the SQL. No, we won't necessarily need SQL again. Let's leave it at that. Then string URL is /logon.jsp. Right now we're always going to go back to the logon page because we don't have enough time to flesh this out yet. But we don't need the connection strings and the users and the other stuff. We will need member object M, and so that's an import from the business package. But what I want is to read the data from the form and try to use our static method in MemberDB to get that member. So inside a try-catch, user ID will be a, as it was before, request get parameter for user ID, and I think I trimmed it the last time just to make sure that they didn't give me something strange. And here we go. All of that code to set up the JDBC and read the connection comes down to this. M, our member object. Okay? All right. M should be fillable or filled by memberdb dot get member by ID, sending it the user ID that we just read. Now I'm not doing any checks on user ID. I probably should, but I'm just going to try and send it on to our persistence DB controller, and I'm going to check what came back. If M is null, nothing came back, then I'm going to set message as no member record retrieved. We'll put our break in. Otherwise, I'm going to put in message equals member, and we'll add the name, m dot get last name found. If we catch an exception, I just did it as a general exception E. Then our message is exception E dot, I'll be right there, or right back, get message. So all I'm doing at this point, since I'm about out of time, is trying to use member DB to get my member. I have three possibilities. It failed, but it might have failed because it was a bad member ID. It succeeded, and we have a last name showing, or it threw an exception, which I wasn't really expecting. But you'll note that member DB does not include an exception handler. Do I need a, and I guess I don't have a throws. So anyway, it will pass back up to our servlet if it crashes. So I just need to set the attribute request, set attribute message MSG. I'm not even going to worry about saving off the member yet, because there's a lot more, not a lot, but there's some more code we need to put back into the servlet. But we can go up and grab from our previous servlet, club logon servlet, we can grab the dispatcher code and drop that in. Well, so our servlet always needs to know where it's going next, so we dispatch based on the URL. Oh, okay, I went to the old project, the previous project, club logon servlet, just so I could grab that request dispatcher code and didn't have to type it again. But if you need to type it, it's there on the screen. Oh, this is so exciting. Of course, it'll probably fail for some reason, and we won't have time to fix the fail tonight, but we'll get there eventually. All right. Does my logon screen have the message displayed? Yes. So that came over. MSG is already using the expression language is already on logon JSP, so I am ready to go. Let me do a select star from TBL members, just so I've got some codes in mind, Z005, Y027, and away we go. All right, Z008. Doesn't matter if you put a password in, we're not looking for it. So bad user ID, logon says, no member record retrieved. And why in the heck is it not running under Firefox? I'm going to have to fix that. But that's a message that I created. Let's try it again. Z005, logon. Oh, member Zimmerman found. I love it. A043, Member Abraham found. If you try to log on with nothing, no member record retrieved. So it's not, even if it's empty, if member ID is empty, it's not crashing the persistence unit. Y027, member Young found. So there it is, your first, I hope successful. Is everyone else successful? No? Yes? No? Yes? You retrieved a record? No? Oh. Mr. Sebastian? No? Oh. Okay, well, we'll hang around and see what we can do to make it happen. But we'll pick this up next week. And I may have to post one recorded lecture because I really need to finish this by next week from our perspective, so you have enough time to work through the final project. So if we finish next week, it gives you two and a half weeks to finish the final project. And if you're doing the extra credit honors stuff, that's JPA inside the honors or inside the final project. So you need some time for that. So anyway, I'll think about that and post as needed. But that'll do it for tonight.